In this session we're going to enable SSH so our Mac can log into the Raspberry Pi. To do this you need to enable SSH in the operating system, in the Linux operating system. You may have done this at the time at which you install the operating system, but if you haven't, we can do this now. So I've logged into my Raspberry Pi as the root user, and now we're going to action a command which is sudo raspi raspi -, and then we're going to go into the config and press enter. Now when we go into here, you'll notice it's much the same as when we first logged on. This blue screen is one of these screens which we configured the Raspberry Pi initially. So I'm just going to use the arrow keys to head down to advanced options and press enter, and then go down to where it's got SSH and press enter. What we need to make sure is it's enabled. So it automatically starts with a highlight. If I want to disable it, I can just push tab. That'll stop this facility from being used, especially if it's going in production. But since we're doing it as a test system, I want this enabled, so I'll press enter. You'll actually see down the bottom there's a little quick flash of the Linux terminal screen as it opens up and configures this. And then I'm going to press OK. And once that's done, I can then press the tab key to head down to finish and press enter. Once you've pressed enter, we'll be back at the terminal once more. Now once you're here, we need to actually know what the IP address of the Raspberry Pi is. So we can use the command ifconfig to actually show us all the configurations of our various networking devices. So currently, you can see up the top here, I have an Ethernet installed, which is Ethernet 0. Then down the bottom here, there is my Wi-Fi NIC, which is the WAN 0. Now at the moment, you can see the MAC address for the Wi-Fi NIC, but there's no actual configuration for an IP address from my router for the Wi-Fi. So I haven't set that up. What I'm interested in is actually the LAN one, which is up the top here, and you can actually see Ethernet 0. And what I'm interested in is the iNet address. Now this is my IP address. So on this network, it's actually set at 192.168.0.8. So that's important to remember. We can actually set them a physical IP address, so they've always got a permanent IP address, and you can have a look at the video on how to set a static IP address for a Raspberry Pi. Now once you've done that, we know what the address is, so we can actually go to our Mac to actually SSH into this. So let's do that now. So on my Mac, I'm going to go up to the Finder and click on that. When I've got the Finder open, I need to type in terminal and press enter. This will actually open up a terminal window for me. Now that I'm logged into my terminal window, I can actually try to SSH into my Raspberry Pi. Now to do this, we actually have to open up the terminal, which we've done, and actually type in SSH, because that's the facility we want to use. And we need to enter in Pi, which is the root user of the Raspberry Pi, and use the @ symbol. Then we need to use that IP address from the Ethernet 0, which was 192.168.0.8. Now this is for my Raspberry Pi. You may have a different IP address or an IP that your router has assigned your Raspberry Pi, or you may have set a static IP address from one of the videos earlier, and you'll be using that IP address. Once I've done that, I'll be able to press enter, and my Mac laptop will be trying to SSH into the Raspberry Pi. Now, it's actually come back and asked for a password. Because we're trying to log on as Pi, which is the root user, I need to enter in that password. If you have a different root user for your Raspberry Pi, or multiple root users, you can use those, which would have been Pi at the address, or whatever the other address is. If I had L Marsden as a root user, I could use L Marsden at 192.168.0.8. Whatever the password that corresponds to that root user, you need to enter that. In this case, it's Raspberry, and press enter. Once I've done that, it actually opens up, and you can see down now in the bottom left hand corner I've actually got Pi at L Marsden, which is the name of my Raspberry Pi. So now I can actually access some facilities. So let's just go into MySQL. So we'll go MySQL, because we've installed a server stack on this, minus password, minus user, and the user is going to be root for MySQL. And I'm going to press enter, and now it's asked me the password for that. I've entered the password, and now you can see that I've actually entered into MySQL. So if I wanted to, I could actually show databases, etc., and that's talking to my Raspberry Pi. What I can do from here is I can quit out of this. Probably need to use exit, but quit will do that as well. And you can see that I'm back at the Raspberry Pi. I can also find the list, so I can go ls to find the list of the directory that I'm currently in. And I can actually control any of the Raspberry Pi facilities from here. The only thing is that SSH doesn't allow for the graphical user interface. So if you wanted to use another computer to control the Raspberry Pi through a graphical user interface, I suggest you have a look at the tutorial on type VNC or VNC, and that'll allow you to control it through a GUI. But this is very good if you're doing MySQL and some PHP programming, because we can actually access the Raspberry Pi and use the console to give it commands and script the Raspberry Pi and bounce PHP scripts off from a remote computer. So that's how you use SSH on a Mac and on a Raspberry Pi.